She was stunned when the mysterious man told her that he had seen her somewhere before. Accusing her of child abduction, he gave her a haughty look. It was breaking up a sunny, warm day at the Marquis of Keratin's house. In the hallway, several cleaning ladies were whispering one to the other, talking about the rumors that Marquis and Marquise were missing. One of them said that she had not heard such a rumor, but she was sure it was true. After overhearing their conversation, the girl with golden hair refuted the rumors and did not hesitate to say that they were not missing, but dead. Also, she was sure that in the near future, this family would be a complete collapse. The girl could talk about the future with full confidence, as she knew that this world was inside the novel. She recalled her story about how before her death, she read one novel and woke up after a dream and found herself inside it. The novel began with a description of the main character, Joshua Ron Keratin. He was the heir to the Marquis family with a long history. However, his life since childhood was a series of endless failures. In the end, he found the man who made his life hell and finally took revenge on him by impaling him with his sword of vengeance. But the main problem is that all his failures started now. All the workers of the house were complaining about Keratin because of the fact that he couldn't provide them with their paychecks due to the disappearance of the Marquesas. Eventually, no one cared about Joshua and his twin sister. Of course, the children in need of care were ignored. They even stopped being provided with the most basic things. The girl couldn't look at this calmly and tried her best to help the twins for a few days by preparing Korean dishes for them. She would have started taking care of them sooner if it hadn't been said that all the people trying to help them died prematurely. There was nothing she could do about it, though. She'd had enough of one death at her young age. She was glad she had gotten through this affair without getting tangled up in it. Now, all she had to do was take more responsibility for her future and set off on a new journey with the stolen shining gems. She could be plagued by doubts, but she appreciated it as a replacement for her unpaid wages. Gathering herself, the girl opened the door to the hallway with a clatter. In front of her, she saw the rest of the servants listening intently to something. Standing erect above the rest of the servants, an important man was making an announcement on behalf of the Duke that the mysterious disappearance of the Marquis of Keratin had made it difficult for the family to fulfill their duties to the servants. Due to the fact that the heir to the title of head was very young, all the privileges, duties of lord and title succession rights must stop, which meant that Keratin Manor would be under the management of the Duke's royal family. This meant that from this day forward, all servants must be dismissed. All the servants in the hall were shocked by the information they heard. None of them could believe that they could be dismissed so abruptly, even without pay. Knowing all the information ahead of time, even the golden-haired girl couldn't believe that all the servants could be dismissed without paying a single coin. But she was glad that she had managed to gather all the jewelry with her, even though she was tormented by her conscience. The girl was immensely glad that no one paid attention to her while the servants' quarters were in chaos. Noticing the morning coming on outside, she cheerfully got out of bed. Looking around the room with her eyes, she noticed the fact that all the other people had picked up their things and left. Deciding to finally start packing as well, she reached for her suitcase, which should have contained the jewelry. Well, upon opening it, she noticed that no jewelry was inside. Not believing her eyes, she started frantically searching the entire room for the jewels, but it was already clear that there were no jewels in the room. In an attempt to find something, she rushed to the Marquise's room. She had spent all the money she didn't have because of the hostess's unbridled behavior. The girl looking for something precious was interrupted by a childish voice behind her. Standing behind her was young Joshua Ron Keratin. He said, with everything, he didn't need her excuses. He was not at all surprised that another servant had decided to run away. Frightened by the conversation, the girl gathered her strength and tried to run out of the room, but she was intercepted by little Joshua, who wanted to say something to her. Ordering her to sit down on the couch, Joshua began to ask her questions about why she hadn't run away earlier like the other servants. Without waiting for an answer, he changed the subject and thanked her for her concern. The girl was surprised that he remembered her. She only brushed it off, saying that she was doing what a normal servant girl should be doing. Adding that it was an honor to serve the house of Marquis Keratin, she was about to leave, but the young lord interrupted her again, for he had not yet had time to say what he wanted to say. Joshua recognized the fact that the girl had not been bullied by his sister like the rest of the servants, and therefore considered that she was the only one who did not despise them. The girl understood the desperation the little boy was in right now, but she wanted to listen to him one last time and finally leave. Standing up from the couch, the girl approached Joshua, sitting down on her knees. She told him that he had nothing to be embarrassed about, and he could say what he wanted. Looking at her with a pitying look, he told her about how the knights of the duchy might soon come and take whatever they wanted. They would be able to rule the Marquis' house as they wished. Joshua realized that in such a situation, no one would take care of him and his sister, so they would need the girl's help to escape. Not believing her ears, the girl questioned the young lord, but he was completely serious. Calling her by name for the first time, he offered her to be their guardian. The young master's words sounded like thunder to the young maid Eugenia. The young gentleman's fame dumbfounded Eugenia incredibly. Re-questioning him, she made for another answer. However, it was exactly the same. For such a simple maid as Eugenia, it was very difficult to fulfill such a request. But Joshua said that since she was going to run away anyway, she could take him and his sister Selly. Eugenia took hold of her head. She wondered how desperate the boy was to ask her for such a request. The girl admitted that in order to take care of the boy and his sister, she needed some amount of money, but she had not received a salary for several months. And if in any situation Joshua or Selly hurt themselves or got sick, Eugenia would not be able to help them. Joshua realized what Eugenia was trying to convey to him. The girl couldn't answer him out of simple sympathy, so she only apologized. She realized that she would not be able to take care of the children, but it could be handled by Eileen Blair, a girl with a rich biography from the Baron's broken family. Because of this, it was impossible for her to find a socialite, so she grew up to become a home teacher. In time, she got a job in the family of Marquis Keratin, teaching the twins. But 6 months ago, she was fired when the family's financial situation became much worse. After her dismissal, Aileen took a job as a caregiver for an elderly lady. However, once she heard the sad news of the Marquis family, she became worried and returned to see the children. She was supposed to come today. It was because of Aileen that Eugenia couldn't become their guardian. And if she had acted in her own way as she wanted, the story would have deviated greatly from the original plot. Eugenia was about to leave, but then she heard the bell ringing, before which Eileen was supposed to arrive. Realizing what was happening, the girl grabbed Joshua's hand and ordered him to follow her. Joshua was greatly surprised. He asked what the girl was doing, but the girl only said there was no time to explain. Hearing the ringing, Eugenia realized that she was hearing the bell in her life. The girl asked if Joshua had stayed with his sister in the secret place. Joshua was even more surprised, asking how she knew about it. The girl replied that when she brought food to the children, she had seen them go somewhere else. Eugenia compulsively asked where that place was. Joshua said that he would tell her the place, but only if the girl became their guardian. Realizing that there was no time at all, she quickly answered positively. Trusting Eugenia, Joshua grabbed her hand and led her to the secret place. Touching the wall with his hand, the boy said that the secret place was here. Joshua tapped on the wall a few times and it began to move away. A small room with a tiny bed and a few boxes appeared in front of the two. The last ring of the bell rang. Eugenia was glad that it rang just in time, for Eileen was due to arrive very soon. Eugenia had been thinking and hadn't heard Joshua calling her. It seemed to him that she was behaving strangely and not listening to him. She started to make excuses at once. As the two men argued, strange noises came from the side of the bed. It was young Mistress Selmia who was sleeping sweetly. She was sick, and Joshua had asked Eugenia not to wake her so she could rest longer. Before Joshua's father disappeared, the boy had made him promise that he would protect Selly at all costs. Eugenia did not understand why in the novel the fate of small children was so unfairly treated by fate. The girl wondered if she had taken over the body of an aristocrat. Would she help these children? Joshua was struck with doubt. He was worried that Eugenia was about to run away, but the girl crouched down at the boy's eye level and sweetly began to persuade him otherwise. Walking further down the hallway, Eugenia said she would sit to one side. Joshua immediately volunteered to sit next to her. The girl giggled at how cute the little boy was. Of course, he didn't like it. The boy began to argue about how he wasn't cute at all, but was already an adult. There was no way Eugenie could wait for Eileen to come. The girl realized that if she became part of this story, something very bad could happen. For her, the decision to leave seemed to be the most correct. Eileen still did not come. Eugenia hoped that if she waited a little longer, she would finally show up, but she was still gone. Eugenia couldn't understand what she should do if Eileen never showed up. She didn't want to take responsibility for the children and die again. Turning to Joshua, Eugenia admitted that there was something she needed to tell him. But with an innocent grin, she said only that she had no money at all. Joshua made a disgruntled face, as if he had expected such a question. He approached Sally, waking her up for a second, and took off her necklace and bow, which contained the gems inside. The boy confessed that he had secretly hidden the largest jewels. He said it would be quite a shame if the other servants found out about this wealth. Eugenia felt quite uncomfortable. She couldn't accept the only thing the twins had left from their parents, given the lily painted on the jewelry, the symbol of their family. Looking at the ring, Eugenia took note of the fact that the stone was fake. Recalling the plot of the novel, she realized that the Marquis had been duped into buying the jewel at a jewelry store. Interrupting her, Joshua stated that Eugenia could only just take them to the Empire of Ace, the home of Duke Horatius. If the girl could do that, all the jewelry would go to her. Looking pitifully at Eugenia, the boy said that the previous Duchess was their grandmother's sister. Returning the bow and necklace back to Joshua, Eugenia told him that only one ring would be enough for her. As soon as the girl said she would fulfill the request, Joshua offered to draw up a real contract. Looking at the piece of paper handed to her by Joshua, her eyes went wide as soon as she saw that she would have to pay a fine of 1 million gold pieces if she failed to comply. As soon as Joshua again complained that the girl might leave them, she immediately signed the unfortunate paper. Giving the contract back, Eugenia said that she too had one condition in which Joshua would have to call her his sister so that they could masquerade as relatives. Finally, all three arrived at a village near the border. Eugenia sold everything in the mansion. She needed to find a village from which to cross the Empire's border, and so had to find a wagon in a hurry. Watching a carefree Sally wandering the streets, Eugenia remembered that in the novel, the assassin had recognized the twins and tried to attack them, killing Eileen. That was why they had to pretend that she was their older sister. Glancing at his dyed black hair, Joshua worried whether it would wash off. Eugenia replied that it could be washed off with water later. However, if it didn't, they could cut it off, because new ones would grow in. Looking at Eugenia going somewhere, Joshua was worried about where she was going. She replied that she was going to make money. Sally's eyes lit up, for she wanted very much to go along with the girl. The little girl was very cramped indoors, for her brother would not even let her open a window. Eugenia took the girl by the hand, saying that today she would work hard to buy her favorite candy. A smile burned on the girl's face, but it was only a mask. A pass was required to travel to the Empire, and because of the deteriorating relations with the Duchy and the Empire, it was very hard to get this pass. For travel bribes, medicines, food expenses, overnight lodging fees, money was badly needed. So, without wasting any time, Eugenia approached the man, asking if she could get a job. Looking at the ads, Eugenia spotted something suitable, but as she looked at the ads, she noticed that the room was quite quiet despite the large number of people. All the people were looking directly at her and whispering about something. Sensing this oppressive atmosphere, Eugenia's eyes quickly spotted a vacancy for a maid to accompany her to Ace's empire. Grabbing the ad sheet, Eugenia walked back over to the man. The man was surprised, as there had not been any willing applicants for the position for a month now, and he was seriously considering taking down the ad. But thinking again, he asked the girl to hurry up, approving her choice. Entering inside the large estate, Eugenia saw another maid in front of her. The girl said that she had come for a meeting with Mr. Elvery. The maid asked if Eugenia had heard of the gentleman before, adding that if Eugenia was hired, she would have to congratulate her. As she approached the room, the maid cautioned Eugenia that it might be a little loud. As soon as Eugenia was embarrassed, the maid began shouting and banging on the door with all her might, beckoning for Mr. Elvery. After a quiet rustle behind the door, it opened. A man with a sleepy expression appeared in front of Eugenia. The young man peering out of the doorway introduced himself to Eugenia, calling himself Elvery. He was pleased to meet her. Shaking the man's hand, Eugenia reciprocated. She had expected her employer to be older. Mr. Elvery invited the girl to go to his room for a short interview. Inside, a mess awaited the girl. The room was very dirty. Eugenia began to look for a place to sit down. Mr. Elvery replied that we already feel at home. Correcting his glasses, the young man immediately asked if the girl knew what kind of work she had come here for. She replied that she knew that Mr. Elvery needed a maid to escort her to the Empire of Ace. The man replied that the job required crossing the border. This posed no problem for the girl. Mr. Elvery was pleased and said that people usually avoid assignments that involved long distances. Eugenia immediately replied that he could not worry about that, since she herself had to cross the border. The man asked if she had been to this empire before. He was interested because it was his first trip there. He also asked if the girl had any experience as a maid. She answered in the affirmative. Mr. Elvery's eyes shone, and he graciously hired Eugenia. Since there were very few candidates, the man was in a very poor position, so he offered the girl to go soon. Eugenia immediately asked for a small concession. She wanted a few more companions to join their company, 2 children. Mr. Elvery hesitated for a moment. He replied that he was not at liberty to decide, and taking the girl with him, went in search of the real employer. Eugenia was a little confused by this information and immediately asked a question. She wondered if she should know something else important about the employer. The young man only cautioned her not to pester him too much. Walking up to one of the doors, the man began banging on it and calling for his master. Without waiting for an answer, he pushed the girl inside the room. It was completely empty and full of darkness. Suddenly, a voice came out ordering the girl to sit down on a chair. The girl immediately apologized for introducing herself late. She immediately asked how she could address the gentleman. The voice replied that his name was Enric. Eugenia began her story about her brother and sister. She was willing to do anything to keep them safe. She was even willing to accept a low fee. Looking at the young man's face, Eugenia marveled at his beauty, beginning to even envy him a little. The man turned sharply toward the girl. He looked her directly in the eyes. It seemed to him that he had met her before. The girl embarrassedly replied that she was seeing him for the first time, but Enric didn't believe her words. Hovering over her, he slowly mumbled that she was a child kidnapper. The girl's heart raced. She immediately began to justify herself, but Enric told her that she was a wanted woman. He couldn't judge whether the accusation was true or not, but turning away from her, he said he was refusing to hire her. Covering her eyes with her hands, the girl silently got up from her chair and headed for the exit. Standing near the door, she turned to the gentleman, asking if she could ask one question. She was concerned if he would report her. She only asked him for his time. She needed to protect Joshua and Selmia before the police caught her. The gentleman politely replied that he wouldn't tell anyone about her secret, but in return, he asked her to keep the place a secret. As she left the room, the girl was glad to remain incognito. On her way out of the building, she was met by Mr. Elvery, asking if everything had gone well. Hearing the disappointing answer, he was surprised and upset at the same time. Saying goodbye to the man, Eugenia left the building. Angrily storming into Enric's room, Elvery declared that he could no longer tolerate such an attitude. He tried with all his might to convince his master to hire the girl, but Enric declared that she was a wanted woman and could not do so. Elvery could not believe what he had just heard. He was sure that the children Eugenia had spoken of were her brother and sister. Could she really have kidnapped them? Enric answered ambiguously, but still hiring her would be too much of a risk for everyone. The reason for the closure of the borders was due to the fact that the soldiers of the deposed duke were still not protected. As a result, the inspection in the border area became very strict. All the entrepreneurs decided to leave. In such a situation, the alliance of 2 foreigners, Enric and Elvery, couldn't raise much suspicion. Enric began to reason that nobles traveling abroad was the safest option, but he didn't think it would take so long to find just one employee. Besides, he knew that there was a very large reward for the girl, so big that an announcement was sent even to the village they were in. Enric thought that Eugenia would cause them a lot more problems, and he didn't want to sink into even more trouble because they didn't have time. Elvery kept missing the opportunity to stand up for the girl. Holding out some sort of document, he said that if Enric would sign it, he would take Eugenie's signature. The man was not pleased at Elvire's words, but he called the gentleman a great strategist and said that they were not just using each other. Enric could not deny the words spoken by Elvire. If they procrastinated any longer, it might play against them. Finally, giving in to his friend, he suggested that they start looking for Eugenia. Glowing with happiness, Elvery ran out of the room and rushed after the girl. Approaching the bulletin board, Eugenia couldn't believe her eyes that she was really a wanted criminal. She hoped that no one else in the village knew about her. The ad did not include Joshua and Selmia's names. Usually, in this kind of crime, they spread information about the children who were wanted. But it appeared that only Eugenia was being sought. Deciding not to focus on the reason, the girl decided to hide all the wanted ads as quickly as possible. Approaching a passerby, his acquaintance began to ask if he had seen the wanted ads from the Crown Duke. The man asked if she was referring to Shigel Hallant. Those notices were posted in every corner of their village. If they could kill the wanted girl, they could receive a huge reward of 1,000,000 gold. Realizing the turbulent situation, Eugenia was about to leave as quickly as possible. But suddenly, she remembered that she had promised to buy Selmia some candy. Once inside, the two men began asking the man if he knew the name of the girl who had come to see them this morning. The man replied that she was not registered with him. The two friends immediately began to quarrel about whose fault it was, but after hearing from the man that she had come a little earlier, they calmed down. Only 10 minutes had passed since she had left. Eugenia was walking silently down a dark alley when suddenly something heavy hit her on the head. Two men loomed over the unconscious girl, who immediately began to argue about the division of the money they would receive after her capture. Before they could finish arguing, Eugenia immediately jumped to her feet, punching one of them in the face. She ran in the opposite direction, but suddenly she bumped into someone sharply. Raising her head, she saw a dark hooded silhouette in front of her. Before she knew it, Eugenia immediately rushed out, but the silhouette grabbed her arm. After removing the hood, Enric appeared in front of her. The girl wondered what on earth he was doing here. She immediately blamed him, for he had promised not to reveal her identity to anyone. At this time, the two people who had previously stunned Eugenia approached the two. Deciding not to engage in a conflict, the two mercenaries decided to negotiate. But taking the girl by the shoulder, Enric ordered her to lower her head as low as possible. He pulled a pistol from his pocket. The mercenaries began to laugh, but at that moment Enric fired decisively, taking two of them to the ground. The girl began to feel safe. She was surprised that Enric had even brought a gun with him. Pulling a silencer from his pocket, the man asked if she knew what the thing was responsible for. Not embarrassed by her knowledge, the girl replied that the silencer reduced the sound when firing. Raising his eyebrows, Enric was surprised at Eugenie's good knowledge of weapons. Usually, noble ladies are not interested in such things. Eugenia immediately replied that she was not a noble woman. Enric wondered, since the gun he was using is brand new, only a small number of people know about it. Late in the day, Eugenia finally thanked Enric. The man replied that his coming was no accident, for he had sought her out to hire her. He said he would tell her all the details as he went, but for now, he ordered her to explore after him. The man told her about how Elvery was completely boring him. Especially given Eugenia's situation, it was the most appropriate thing to do, so he decided to hire her. After his words, Enric was mysteriously silent. After looking into the girl's eyes, he slowly mumbled that he wanted Eugenia to be his wife. Eugenia's eyes widened to an unbelievable size, because she knew Enric very little and she had 2 children to take care of. But quickly interrupting her, Enric said she had it all wrong. The current situation was not favorable. There were people who crossed the border from time to time, but now they were even fewer in thought. Eugenia realized that all roads out of the country could soon be closed altogether, so the most cautious option was to pretend to be a family. Agreeing, the two decided to see each other later. Ordering Eugenia to get ready, Enric said he would be waiting for her at the inn. Finally exhaling, Eugenia couldn't believe what had just happened to her. She saw Enric fire his gun right in front of her, hitting 2 mercenaries. She was glad he believed her words anyway, though. Gathering all her strength, Eugenia opened the door to the room. Rushing over to the girl, Sally immediately started asking if she had bought candy. Handing her a small bag, Eugenia apologized for being gone so long. Because of the rain, the candy was a little wet, but the little girl didn't care at all. Looking at the girl's hands, Sally asked what had happened to her. She replied that she had just fallen and that she was fine. Running up to her, the 2 children immediately began to worry about her, asking if she was hurt. Grimacing at all of this, Eugenia apologized for disturbing them. Standing up seriously in front of her, Joshua ordered her to be careful. The girl smiled, waved, and offered to eat candy with Elmi while hanging up her wet cape. Standing in front of her, Joshua asked if she would work with the man who had escorted her here. Answering in the affirmative, the girl said that was just her employer. He wasn't sure of her identity, so she couldn't find out about him first. Raising an eyebrow, Joshua accused her of being irresponsible since she fell for such a thing. Observing the whole situation, Selly, smiling, said that Joshua was not doing much better at all. Surprised even more, he questioned her, but she continued by saying that he had no social skills whatsoever. His sister had always been on his side, but she couldn't fool him now. Watching the children begin to bicker, Eugenia interrupted them. No matter how much Joshua pretended to be an adult, he was still a child. Deciding to change the subject, Eugenia started talking about work. After all, the children also needed to know about everything. Since the borders might be closed soon, they needed to leave the duchy. For greater safety, it was decided to go with her employer. Telling the children to start packing, Eugenia stopped abruptly. Smiling, she exclaimed happily that she had a husband. At this news, the children froze with amazement. Joshua made an indignant face and asked her again, but she answered in the same way. Selly, meanwhile, glowed with happiness as she hurried to congratulate Eugenia. Spreading his arms, Joshua began to argue about what a wedding could be like in the current situation. Where did Eugenia suddenly get a husband from? After all, she said she would start looking for a job. Sitting down next to him on her knees, Eugenia began to assure the boy that he misunderstood everything. What she meant to say was that due to circumstances, she would have a husband to cover for a while. Eugenia was worried about not revealing the children's identities. Asking them to try a little harder, she hugged them gently. Someone rang the doorbell. After assuring the children that everything was fine, Eugenia opened the door. 2 men were lined up in front of her. Pleased to see them, Enric asked if she was ready to go. Glancing around at the boy who approached, Elvery noticed the black color of his hair, noting that it was good. He was worried about what to do if the children differed greatly from Enric's appearance. Stepping inside the room, he said that the strangers would no doubt believe that Joshua and Selly were Enric's children. Getting nervous, Joshua turned to Eugenia, recalling her words that her marriage would be a sham. She never said a word about him becoming someone else's son. Standing up to the boy, Enric said he didn't care about that, but Joshua was obligated to play the role of his son in order to deflect suspicion. Getting even angrier, the boy pointed his finger at Elvert, saying that he could be their father too. Bowing his head, Enric said he expected Joshua to be more patient, muttering that if the boy was just unsure of himself, he would apologize. Stomping his foot, Joshua declared that nothing was impossible for him. If it was necessary, he was willing to play his part flawlessly. Deciding to defuse the situation, Eugenia suggested that everyone get to know each other. Having volunteered to do it first, Selly introduced herself and politely asked everyone to take care of her. Eugenia knew that Joshua had no tolerance at all for introducing himself by nickname, but now he had to show his manners. However, Joshua said he absolutely did not want to do that. Spreading her arms, Eugenia defiantly gathered her things and slowly began to approach the exit. Abruptly interrupted, her Joshua relented and mumbled through his teeth that his name was Shushu. Delighted at the acquaintance, Elvery offered to carry Eugenia's luggage, but she declined, saying she could take care of herself. Stepping forward, Enric politely took the luggage from Eugenia's hands. Just as she wanted to take it back, saying he didn't have to do so, Joshua took hold of her arm. Just then, Selly ran up as well, grabbing her other one. Seeing the new room, the kids were immediately excited about the change of scenery. They had a brand new room, which they liked very much. After seeing the children off, Enric informed Eugenia that he would be expecting her after she had sorted out her new quarters. Stepping aside, Elvery informed Enric that the relationship between the children and the girl was very good, and if she really was the kidnapper, the twins would treat her much worse. Enric agreed with his words and suggested that the subject should not be brought up again. Relieved at this, Elvery looked forward to the moment when they would finally leave this place. Scratching his head, Enric agreed with that. Suddenly, there was a knock on the door. It was Eugenia. Joyfully letting her inside, Elvery informed her that she had arrived much earlier than they had expected. The girl had few belongings, and apologizing in advance, she showed the 2 children in front of her who were eager to go with her. Reminding herself, Joshua stated that they were competent enough to attend this meeting. After making sure everything was in order, Mr. Elvery suggested that everyone gather around the communal table to clarify all roles. Eugenia, Enric, and the children were to be the full family, while Elvery was to pretend to be the chamberlain and coachman. Enric suggested changing the children's names, but the children refused the idea. Selly wanted to be called by her first name, and Joshua asked to be called simply Shu. Mr. Elvery, thinking of Eugenia, suggested that she be called Zhenya, but that name was too similar to her real name, so the girl suggested that she be called simply Hari. Everyone liked the idea, but the girl didn't think that after getting into the maid's body, someone would call her by her real name again. Turning to the girl, Enric asked the nickname. She said it was just a similar name and she reacted quickly to it, so there was no cause for concern. Eugenia thought for a moment. Her real name made her think of her past. She was cut short by Enric calling her real name. The girl turned sharply, and he was surprised that she was actually very quick to respond to him. Finally, getting everyone sorted out, Elvery offered to make an ID. Everyone gathered thanked. Suddenly, the girl was approached by little Joshua. He asked if he should now call her Hari instead of Eugene. She replied that he would quickly get used to it and reminded him that from now on, children should call her mom. Suddenly, footsteps were heard outside the door. Eugenia gathered the children close to her, ordering them to stay back. Elvery and Enric became slightly nervous. After a brief silence, Elvery asked who was there. It was the innkeeper who responded. She wanted to warn that she had burned her hand and now she couldn't cook dinner. Having stopped worrying, Eugenia kindly volunteered to cook dinner herself. The girl asked the children what they wanted for dinner. Selly immediately answered that she would like a ham sandwich, toast with milk, and sweet cookies. She wanted to add something else, but Joshua shut her mouth, telling her that she only had to pick one dish. A little frustrated, Selly thought for a moment and said that she would like pancakes with lots of whipped cream. Hearing the little girl's pleading, Eugenia eagerly went to the kitchen. To Eugenia's surprise, Enric volunteered to help her. The girl did not expect much help from him, however. The man showed masterful skills. He exceeded all expectations. When everything was ready, Eugenia called the children to dinner. Very appetizing-looking dishes were served on the table. Selly immediately started eating, but Enric carefully asked her to slow down or her stomach would hurt. Looking around, Enric Joshua wanted to ask why he was so sure that the borders would be closed. After the death of the previous duke last year, the Duchy of Halland had split into two factions. Benjamin, the bastard child of the previous ruler, pretended to be his cousin, the heir Shigel, in order to ascend the throne. After usurping the throne, Benjamin became the duke's aide-de-camp, in the aftermath of which the heir Siegel had to go on the run. And until he is caught, the situation will only get worse. It was during this period that a pair of marquis, who did not belong to either faction, went missing. Turning to Eugenia, Joshua wondered that lately the number of wanted criminals in the duchy had become much higher. In order to catch fugitives, the border control has become much more picky. That was why Enric and Elvery were going to use identity cards that would state that they were residents of the Ace Empire. Even with an ID, the two men could easily be subject to suspicion. Therefore, it was decided to create an image of a safe family. Enric proposed a plan in which the Duchy of Halland would become Eugenia's home. They were to return home to stay with her father in his final hours. Enric's story was enough to explain why the men from Ace had come to the duchy and wanted to cross the border. Joshua had to agree with Enric's words, for they seemed very reasonable to him. Rejoicing at this, Enric offered the boy some more food. However, he was quite surprised at the large portion. To which Enric replied that if the boy ate a lot, he would become big. Creating an identity card for Eugenia should have taken about a week. In the current situation, it was the best thing Elvery could do. To this, Enric replied that they should have hurried the preparations. Elvery offered to meet with the merchants, as they had arranged to visit right after tomorrow afternoon. Looking at her outfit, Eugenia recognized that it wouldn't do to pretend to be an aristocrat. Enric suggested picking at least 3 dresses, some jewelry, and hats. To this, Elvery replied that paired jewelry would be the hardest to get. Paired jewelry was as important a gift as an engagement ring. This accessory of a pair of jewelry was one of the attributes of a wedding on this continent. After thinking about it for a bit, Eugenia said that she could prepare the paired jewelry that she had inherited from her late parents, as she had supposedly heard earlier that her family had been quite wealthy before she was born. Approaching Joshua, the girl asked to borrow the brooch and pendant for a few days. The boy graciously agreed. Eugenia hugged the boy with all her might, to which he reacted rather strangely, asking why she was acting like that. The girl was very grateful to him. Leaving the hotel, Eugenia was ready to go further. As soon as Enric and Eugenia stepped on the threshold of the clothing store, they were kindly met by a salesman who had been waiting for them for a long time. He had prepared for the incoming customers many precious fabrics that had been brought to this place from across the sea. The store always did its best to offer the best goods to its customers. Shyly looking down, Eugenia wondered what they were looking for mourning clothes for. Enric carefully embraced the girl, accusing the seller of being frivolous and rude. The salesman began to justify himself, and Eugenia immediately apologized for crying. She said that her father had passed away not so long ago, and therefore she wanted to grieve for him until all the sadness of her heart was gone. Taking the girl's hands in his, Enric told her that he would always be there for her, and he hoped that she would feel much better. Looking at the sweet, grieving couple, the vendor apologized once more and admitted that he had committed the unpardonable sin. Wiping her tears with a handkerchief, Eugenia said that the salesman had nothing to worry about, and she wanted to see the outfits soon. Turning her head at her assistants, the clothes seller ordered them to get everything ready faster. Laying out the fabrics on the table, the salesman assured the girl that she would definitely like them, but first he needed to take the measurements. Eugenia did not expect this. She was worried, because under the cape was her old clothes, which did not stretch to the clothes of a noble lady. Interrupting the vendor, Enric assured him that there was no need to do so. The clothes salesman disagreed with him because the finished outfit might not fit the girl, but Enric insisted, saying that his wife was pregnant with her third child. Sighing with relief, Eugenia confirmed Enric's words. Turning his head towards the girl, Enric asked if she was expecting the arrival of their child. Her husband was sure that the child would look like her and would be very cute. The clothing salesman nodded and asked the couple to wait while he packed the outfits. After waiting for the salesman to leave, Eugenia turned to Enric, because they had not discussed anything about the third child. With the words of the girl, the man agreed, but also boasted of his success in deception. Eugenia admitted that she was very confused. Enric praised her for her excellent acting, calling her a great young man. The couple returned to the hotel, where Elvery was waiting for them, who hurried to tell them about the problem. The ID was finished much faster than the man had expected, but he couldn't get the marriage certificate because the situation was so bad that even the master wished to leave Hallant, and he asked to go with them. At the not particularly pleasant news, Enric offered to put his own conditions on it. After passing through the gate, they were to part immediately, and the very date of departure would have to be determined by them. If the master did not agree to these two conditions, they would be forced to go without additional variables. Having learned the date of departure, Eugenia went to the children to inform them that they were leaving tomorrow afternoon. Rejoicing at this, the boy immediately asked if they would part with Elvery and Enric after passing through the gate. Eugenia replied that it might arouse suspicion, so they should separate after arriving in Ace's Empire. After informing the children that the carriage ride to Ace's Empire would take about 24 hours, Eugenia suggested they change into their pajamas and go to bed. After a few minutes, the children were already dressed in cute pajamas, which they were quite happy with. Wishing the children good dreams, Eugenia put out the fire and lay down on the same bed with them. Eugenia was tormented by doubts about tomorrow. She could not sleep and worried whether she would be able to play her role well tomorrow. But looking at the sleeping children filled her with confidence. She promised herself that she would protect them at all costs. Stepping out onto the balcony to get some fresh air, Eugenia noticed Enric practicing with his sword. She wondered why he was awake at such a late hour. Noticing the girl, Enric wondered the same thing. The girl replied that she just couldn't sleep, so she decided to get some fresh air. Smiling shyly, she wished him a good night. Enric smiled and reciprocated, calling her by the name Hari. Walking back inside, the girl began to panic, for she acted as if she had stolen something. After morning came, Eugenia changed into rich clothes and visited the children to see if they were ready. In front of the girl stood two dressed-up children. Sally started waving her hand, catching Eugenia's attention. Elvery graciously gave her his hand, helping Sally climb onto the carriage. Calling out to Joshua, who was stroking the horses, he offered to help him as well. Standing together, Enric and Eugenia were approached by the hooded stranger who was to accompany them all the way. After saying hello to the man, Enric announced that he and Elvery would ride the horses together. They would ride on the side of Eugenia, and she could simply open the window at any time. Once inside the carriage, Eugenia began to look at the view outside the window. The thought crossed her mind that if they went through the gate, they could finally ride into Ace's empire. As the carriage approached the gate, the guards immediately said that no one could leave now and ordered everyone to turn around. Enric stepped out of the carriage, introducing himself to the nobles. The guards became nervous as they saw a resident of the Ace Empire in front of them. The guard had heard that the imperial family took great care of their people, so he personally wanted to check Enric, but he was interrupted by the captain of the guard, ordering the man to show his identity card. After carefully looking over the documents, the captain asked the reason why Enric was visiting the Duchy of Halland. He replied that he had come to pick up his wife and children visiting his parents' home. Deciding to personally verify Enric's words, the captain volunteered to inspect the carriage. Approaching Eugenia, the captain of the guard asked the same question he had asked her husband. The girl replied that news had reached her of her own father, who was seriously ill. After thinking for a while, the captain decided to ask some more questions about what the girl's maiden name was. Eugenia answered that her name was Harry Lapland. She added that she would have been married for 8 years this year. After writing something down in his notebook, the captain asked Eugenia to remove her headdress so that he could see her face. Eugenia immediately became nervous. She began to think that the captain recognized her from the ad. Noticing Eugenia's anxiety, the children sitting next to her asked if she was okay. The girl quickly pulled herself together. Deciding to act radically, she began to shout at the captain of the guards for his strong disregard for etiquette towards a girl in mourning. The captain began to calm Eugenia down, but she continued to press him, ordering him to call someone higher in rank. Cold sweat began to flow from the captain's face after the girl's loud words. In a trembling voice, he said that the head of public order and lands were above him. Realizing that the girl might go too far, the captain, along with the rest of the guards, bowed and apologized. The inspection was over at this point. Watching as Eugenia wiped the sweat from her face, the children asked how she was feeling. She replied that she was fine and she was glad it was over. Finally, a voice was heard ordering the gate to be opened. Eugenia, along with her children, could finally leave the place. Far enough away from the gate, Enric slowed his horse and approached his traveling companion, saying that this was the end of their agreement. But the man abruptly grabbed the reins and slapped them against the horses, which sped forward. There was a commotion inside the carriage. Eugenia's children began to be thrown in different directions. The girl hugged them, assuring them that everything would be all right. Thinking how to protect the children and stop the coachman, Eugenia decided to get out of the carriage. At that time, Elvery and Enric were approaching them on horses. Taking out a pistol from his saddlebag, Enric aimed at the coachman, but noticing Eugenia, he quickly ordered her to get inside. After listening to him, the girl rushed back to the children and almost fell down. Taking aim, Enric fired a shot at the wheel of the carriage, causing it to finally stop. Opening the carriage door, Enric checked to see if the girl and the children were all right. He motioned for Elvira to help them out. Approaching the coachman, Enric wondered who could have bribed him. Eugenia's voice was heard, holding a fainted Sally in her lap. Carrying the girl in her arms, Eugenia began to think of ways to help her as soon as possible. Asking Elvira to keep an eye on the girl stepped aside. She noticed a fruit growing on a tree. Plucking the fruit, Eugenia approached the girl. She asked her to open her mouth. As soon as the juice of the fruit hit the girl's tongue, she immediately came to her senses. Joshua started yelling at his sister as he was very scared, but she assured him that she was fine now. Approaching Eugenia, Enric asked her to step aside to talk privately. The man began reprimanding the girl for stepping out of the moving carriage. The girl made excuses that she couldn't let her and the children be grabbed, so she wanted to attack the coachman and push him away, then take hold of the reins. Enric asked her what she would do that with. Eugenia pulled a bag of powder from her pocket, which she had used for self-defense many times. The man clapped his hand over his face, asking her why she just didn't wait for him. Couldn't she trust him? Eugenia thought to herself that she had accomplished her task. After all, they had left the duchy as agreed. She considered that she was no longer needed by Enrik and Elvery. Enrik sighed, thinking that in the girl's eyes he seemed like a complete lousy man, but the girl began to assure him back. According to the agreement between Enrik and the girl, they were to leave the Duchy of Halland together and make their way to the Empire of Aes. Enrik said that from now on it was his turn to take Eugenia safely to the Empire. If she couldn't trust him, then let her trust herself who signed the contract. Eugenia apologized to Enrik. She just didn't have confidence in herself since she wasn't an important person. The girl was just a minor character in the novel who could be thrown out at any time for the sake of the protagonist. Therefore, for the sake of survival, she had to take care of herself. When Eugenia took Eileen's place, she could have ended up as well, forfeiting her life for the sake of the children. Maybe she had to give her life too and protect Joshua and Sally. Catching Eugenia's attention, Enrik told her that she was far more important than she realized, adding that self-sacrifice wasn't the only option. Even as she thought about her siblings, she had to accept that the fact that she was their guardian mattered a great deal. Eugenia thought about changing the children's future, but she was actually tied up in the affair. After circling the girl with his gaze, Enrik asked her to hold out her hand. She was all wounded, so he carefully bandaged it with his handkerchief and offered to return to the others. When Eugenia returned, she noticed Joshua sitting confidently on his horse. Eugenia had fallen off the horse, and Enrik kindly offered to help her. Lifting the girl in his arms, Enrik kindly placed her on the horse. Their faces were a few centimeters apart, which made Eugenia very embarrassed. Noticing Eugenia's embarrassment, Joshua asked if she was all right, noting that her temperature was very high. After nightfall, everyone decided to set up camp and build a fire. Watching the fire, Enrik apologized for the fact that they would not be seeing comfort anytime soon. Eugenia wasn't worried about that. She was only worried about Sally. Eugenia was glad she had brought her luggage with her, despite the heaviness, for the sick girl could not sleep on the bare ground. Standing up from the log, Enrik said that he and Elvery would remain on night watch and suggested that Eugenia and Joshua go to bed soon. Lying on the mattress and looking up at the stars, Eugenia didn't know if she would be able to fall asleep since it was the first time she had slept outside. She thought about giving Selmia another medicine and checking on Joshua's condition just in case. And slowly the thoughts began to sink Eugenia into sleep. In her hands, the girl held a bow in the shape of a butterfly with a glowing stone inside. Suddenly, the blue glow of the stone transformed into hundreds of slowly flying butterflies that surrounded Eugenia. The fluttering sound of wings changed into a mysterious voice ordering her to wait for him. Awakened by the melodious sound, Eugenia looked around at the children, thinking that the song was sung by them. However, the children were sound asleep. Thinking it was just a dream, the girl got up from the mattress. She saw Enrik sitting alone by the fire. The girl carefully asked why the man was still awake. He replied that Elvery had gone on a scouting trip, so he needed to stay alert. Eugenia offered to replace Enrik, but he refused her as he was still awake. The girl questioned if Enrik suffers from insomnia, but he answered in the negative. To this, Eugenia offered to help anyway. Taking peppermint oil and dried leaves from her bag, she quickly brewed tea and handed the mug to Enrik. After appreciating the flavor and taking a sip, Enrik thanked the girl and she immediately asked if his neck hurt. Eugenia gave him the ointment and advised him to apply it to his temple and the back of his neck. Examining the jar of ointment in her hand, Enrik asked how much he had to pay her for it. The girl smiled sweetly, for it was only a friendly gift. But she was nervous, because she didn't know if they could be called friends because of the huge difference in status. Enrik calmed her down, saying that he would gladly accept the gift. Enrik asked if Eugenia had studied herbalism and suggested she become a pharmacy manager, to which the girl laughed and said he was probably right. Eugenia had aspired to a luxurious city life since childhood, but after her father died, she had no one to rely on. She needed to look for a job, and so she moved to the city. Also, she had never studied herbalism. Enrik was confused by her answer. He couldn't stop wondering how she was so good with herbs. Eugenia laughed at that. Enrik had a surprisingly large number of questions today. Eugenia answered that her father was an herbalist, but she had never learned from him. She wasn't even allowed to go near the herb. But that was not a skill that could be learned by looking over her shoulder. That was what kept Enrik occupied. After thinking about it for a moment, Eugenia agreed that it was rather odd. No matter how many times she tried to remember, nothing came to her mind. Besides, she didn't have any real memories of her childhood until a certain age. The girl had heard her father tell her long ago that she had gotten lost in the woods at the age of 5. And 3 days later, she was found at the highest point of the forest. She was safe, thanks to the wild animals that sheltered her. Upon reflection, Eugenia realized that she had begun to know all about herbs from that very moment. Perhaps it was a consequence of what had happened. Noticing the girl's anxiety, Enric asked her what she was thinking about. She replied firmly that she should really go to study to be a pharmacist. Enric supported this idea. There were many precious herbs in the empire. Eugenia was very interested in this, because she would be able to make even more medicines. She got the idea to create a cure for insomnia, which would help Enric a lot. The morning came. Selmia's condition had improved greatly, which couldn't have pleased Eugenia more. Due to the difficulty of riding the horses, all of Eugenia's muscles were very sore, so she gathered some medicinal herbs for herself as well. Determined not to sit idle, Enric also taught Joshua how to ride horses, which he liked very much. Finally, after a while, they managed to reach Ace's empire. The atmosphere was completely different from the one in the duchy. Asking Eugenia to take her time, Enric said that they were about to do another inspection. This time they had to try their best, though they didn't need to exert themselves so much, because it would be over quickly. Holding Eugenia's horse by the reins, Elvery told the girl not to worry. Looking at Eugenia's ID, the guard asked her to hand over her husband's document. Glancing at Enric's important name, the soldier immediately apologized for such a bother. It was an honor for him to meet this man. Eugenia was greatly surprised that getting through the guards this time was so easy. Joshua peered out of the door, shouting that he could handle the washing himself, while Eugenia wiped Selmia's head. Looking at the roots of her hair, Eugenia noticed that the unnatural black color of the girl's hair was slowly beginning to wash away. It would be wise to dye her hair again, but Eugenia didn't want to waste money on buying dye. Eugenia said that she would soon be able to part with Enric, so it would just have to wait a little longer. Back home, Elvery was immensely happy to finally get a taste of his hometown. Sitting at the communal table, Enric asked Eugenia if she enjoyed her lunch. The girl also noticed that today the young man was wearing gloves, but her thoughts were interrupted by Selmia shouting that she was very full. After making sure the children were full, Enric asked them to leave, telling them that the adults' only conversation was about to begin. Joshua didn't like that, but he agreed nonetheless. The boy abruptly turned to Enric and said that he could firmly declare himself an adult from now on, but Eugenia said she would tell him all about it later. After waiting for the children to leave, Enric offered to break up with Eugenia right away. Not knowing why, but this news upset her. Rising from her chair, the girl said that they had all been through a lot during this time, and thanks to them, they were able to make it to the Empire. But Elvery interrupted her, saying that she was the one who had helped them a lot. Clutching her dress, Eugenia asked if her wanted list was valid in the Empire. Enric replied that the Empire does not receive wanted lists from the Duchy, so she may not worry about the wanted list. Enric also asked Eugenia to return the ID card as they are good at forgeries. After taking the ID card, Enric placed a large bag of coins on the table, expressing his gratitude for Eugenia's hard work. Looking at the huge pile of coins, Eugenia couldn't believe her eyes that the reward would be so huge. She thanked the men from the bottom of her heart. Bowing his head, Elvire said he had something to prepare and he withdrew. Taking the necklace that Eugenia had given him, Enric placed it on the table, saying that he had treated it well and there were no blemishes on it. Eugenia asked if the man would leave right away. The man replied in the affirmative, as he still had unsolvable business to attend to. Enric added that the Empire is much safer than the Duchy, but it is still better to buy good things than cheap, because the price should include the safety of the buyer. He advised the girl to remember not to expose herself too much. With a look in the girl's eyes, Enric suggested the girl take a walk if that was okay with her. Approaching a huge tree, Eugenia was surprised by its size. At this time, Enric remembered the incident when Eugenia recognized the gun. The information about the gun was secret, so Enric still had to report it to the capital when he returned there. Moving closer to the girl, Enric reminded her of the incident in the alley. He also asked if she knew how to shoot. To this, the girl answered sharply in the negative. In Eugenia's past life, if a civilian had a gun, he was immediately caught by the police. The girl asked why Enric was so much interested. He had doubts about her, but still decided to give her a gun as a special gift for an emergency. But the girl refused, for even if she had one, she wouldn't use it. Nodding, Enric held out the memorabilia to her as a gift. Eugenia was reluctant to accept it, but accepted it nonetheless, asking when she could get it back. Enric replied that she could return the item the next time they met, or she could return it a year later. In case Enric wasn't near that tree, she would bury it right there. Looking at the girl who was building something out of rocks, Enric asked what she was doing. Eugenia was building a small stone tower as a sign. Enric looked at her skeptically and said that if someone kicked the tower, it would fall apart. Eugenia laughed and said that the world wasn't that bad. The girl thought that maybe people wouldn't destroy the tower as someone's heartfelt wish. Turning to the man, Eugenia thanked him from the bottom of her heart, taking his hand gently. Looking angrily at Eugenia, Joshua asked why she was gone for so long. Eugenia apologized and ordered Joshua to go to bed, but he refused, saying he couldn't sleep when he was eaten up by curiosity. The girl said she came in late because she was seeing Enric and Elvery off. Joshua was surprised by that and a little upset because they hadn't even said goodbye to him. Holding out the brooch and pendant to Joshua, Eugenia finally returned them to the boy. The girl handled the jewelry very carefully and wanted to hand it to Joshua, but suddenly a mysterious voice asked her when he was coming. Surprised, Eugenia asked the boy again, but the boy, as it turned out, did not say anything. Eugenia thought the words were spoken by Selmia, however Joshua would have heard them too. With his hands spread, Joshua, smiling, said that Eugenia might have heard it, for old people often do that from fatigue, but Eugenia, smiling, said that she wasn't that old. She was only 21. Eugenia was still much older than Joshua, and that's why he called her old anyway. Eugenia was mortified by that. She realized that the boy was very comfortable with her now. After putting the kids to bed, Eugenia wished them sweet dreams. Tomorrow, they had a lot of things to do, so she also needed to go to bed. The girl fell on the bed. The words spoken by the mysterious voice did not come out of her head. It seemed to her that the voice was similar to the one she had heard in her last dream, but now she knew for sure that she hadn't heard it. Yawning, she realized that she had been awake on the bed for a long time. Joyfully rolling around with cotton candy, Sally was telling Eugenia that she wanted to eat it so badly. Eugenia sat down next to the girl and told her that she would have to eat everything she held in her hands. Saying that there was nothing she could do, Eugenia suggested that the girl share with her. After thinking about it, Eugenia was worried about where Joshua had disappeared to. The boy stood in front of the forge again, looking at the swords. Eugenia realized that if the boy felt the same way as Sally did, she should buy him one. Suggesting that the boy go, he agreed. Taking stock of the situation, Eugenia bought medicinal herbs and necessities. Finally, all three of them approached the village's information desk. Leaning against the counter, Eugenia asked the girl if she had a map of the Ace Empire. The girl, smiling sweetly, asked her to wait a moment. Tugging the girl by the sleeve, Joshua asked why she needed the map. She replied that she needed to know which road led to the Duke's land. Taking the map in her hands, Eugenia looked at Joshua and asked if he had completely forgotten their real purpose. The girl was looking at the map as she was suddenly distracted by Selmia pointing her finger to one side, saying that it might be interesting there. Running away from Eugenia, Sally said that she really wanted to see what was there. Eugenia and Joshua simultaneously yelled at the girl, ordering her not to run. Covering her ears with her hands, Sally began to complain about the nagging, saying that Joshua and Eugenia were exactly the same. Eugenia laughed and said that if the girl fell down, she would be in trouble. Selmia ran back up to Eugenia, giving her a hug. She asked why they were laughing. Looking at the map in bed with the children, Eugenia pointed her finger at the village they were staying in. Looking at the Duchy of Juratia that the boys were headed to, Joshua marveled at its size. Joshua wondered that if they came to the duchy, if they could finally meet their great aunt. Her residence could be located in the capital of the empire. There was a high possibility that she could have been in this territory. Excitedly raising her hand, Sally wanted to ask a question. The girl wanted to know if they would be able to ride the carriage again. After the events that had happened with Selmia, a carriage ride might be hard to come by. Since the boys were not in the duchy, they could get there quickly. Refusing the girl, Eugenia said that this time they would go by train. Selmia was very happy about that. Joshua told his sister that this time she would ride in comfort, and Eugenia was at this time very happy to see the children happy. She realized that when she drove them, her work would come to an end. Upset, Eugenia finally realized that if she parted with the children, she would go back to her usual life of loneliness. Barely holding back tears, Eugenia accepted the fact that she would be very lonely again. Trying to distract herself, Eugenia began to put the children to bed. Stepping off the train, a voice was heard broadcasting the arrival at the Duchy of Juracia station. Because it was the northern region, it was much colder than Eugenia had anticipated. Turning to Eugenia, Joshua asked if they would head to the Duke's house right away. The girl said no and said that they needed to prepare first. Eugenia said they were to meet a noble lady and suggested they go to the inn first. Examining her luggage, Eugenia looked for clothes, but suddenly she noticed that she forgot to return Enric his handkerchief. The girl realized that if she returned the handkerchief too, she would have nothing at all to remind her of Enric. In any case, this would happen in a year, so Eugenia decided not to get upset before the time. Suddenly, Eugenia heard Joshua beckoning her. He was asking what they should do now. The girl replied that they should rest for a while, and she would go out for a while. Grabbing the girl by her dress, Sally asked to go with her. Politely refusing, Eugenia said she would go alone after all. Taking the girl by the hand, Eugenia promised that they would go for a walk together either tomorrow or the day after. Joshua said that he and his sister would be waiting and asked the girl to come back as soon as possible. Joshua told Eugenia to look in front of her so she doesn't fall and not to follow strangers just because they offered you candy. Taking her brother's hand, Sally asked if Eugenia would be back soon. Joshua told her not to worry, since nothing bad would ever happen to her. Asking Sally to come over, Joshua said that they needed to discuss something about Eugenia's job. Examining some mysterious item on the table, Joshua asked Sally to keep it a secret. Eugenia returned home, to which the kids got very excited. Joshua was embarrassed because he noticed that the girl looked distraught. After putting the box of stuff on the ground, Eugenia suggested that the kids get their natural hair color back. Eugenia thought it would be best to do it now, but suddenly she noticed the restless expressions on the children's faces. The girl asked what was wrong with the children. However, they replied that they were fine. After bathing, the children's natural hair color returned, but they were not particularly happy about it. Approaching Eugenia, Sally said that she didn't like the old color. Eugenia was surprised, since it was her own color. Joshua ran up to Selmia and ordered her not to say anything nonsense. Surprised, Eugenia asked Joshua what was the matter. Approaching the boy, Eugenia asked if he had anything to say. Joshua thought that it would be difficult to come to the Duke of Juracia's house at once. Eugenia remembered walking through the market and asking the merchant if all the goods were good. The village seemed like a good place to live to her. The merchant replied that thanks to the Duke, all the people in that village lived absolutely peaceful lives. Eugenie wanted to meet him at least once. The merchant asked her if she really thought it was so easy for ordinary people to meet him. You have to be an aristocrat to meet the Duke, but the woman who approached said that even that wouldn't help. About the time all of the Duke's relatives had gathered, the House of Juracia stopped receiving any guests, for they said they were staying there for the whole. The merchant said about the Duke's statement that he wouldn't open the doors even if His Majesty the Emperor came. A woman standing nearby tugged at the man's ear, saying there was nothing he couldn't muss up. Reasoning, Eugenia assumed that the noble lady and the Duke must be here. The woman said that the Duke was staying in the capital and would return to his lands around this time. The girl wondered about the Duke's words, whether she should have at least come and see. She thought it best to do something at least. Eugenie sent a letter addressed to the noble lady Jacqueline Juracia. She wanted to return the 2 missing flowers, but doubted the door to their home would open before their family event was over. After hearing Eugenia's story to the end, Joshua said it was clear to him. The girl offered to get her a job with the Juracia family as a maid as the relatives arrived. Joshua said that since Eugenia would have a chance of meeting their great-aunt, the girl should take the jewelry inherited from the Marquesa. Eugenia said that there was little chance that the noble lady would recognize them. After listening to Eugenia, Joshua grabbed a pair of scissors and cut off a small strand of his blue hair for the girl to show to his grandmother as proof. Looking at a worried Eugenia, the boy said he would be fine. The hair would grow back anyway. Eugenia promised the boy that she would show the strands of his grandmother's hair no matter what. Falling to her knees, Eugenia couldn't believe that the recruitment was already complete. Eugenia had spent several days searching, but there was no progress. Most likely, the people in the castle thought she was very irresponsible, since she left her last job without a letter of recommendation. Looking at the Duke's huge castle, Eugenia thought about how she could get there. Eugenia heard that the 2 hottest weeks of the year had begun, but it was probably fall, because Sally had a cough. so the girl needed to stop by the shop and buy some medicinal herbs. Looking around the shop, Eugenia looked for dried thyme, remembering that she needed to buy anise as well. Out of the corner of her ear, Eugenia heard two men arguing near the counter. Noticing one of the men, Eugenia thought she had seen him somewhere before. The shorter man was assuring the other that Moverick and Hecken had the same effectiveness. As soon as the man began to argue again, the salesman refused to sell to him and rudely asked him to leave. Finally relenting, the blonde-haired man asked the vendor to sell him the herbs. Eugenia intervened and dissuaded the man from buying the herbs as they were completely useless. Eugenia assumed that the blonde-haired man's boss was complaining of joint pain since he needed Moverick. The man was surprised and asked how the girl knew that. Eugene learned that Moverick dried into a powder, and made of it pills. It was an old folk remedy that reduced more in arthritis. Compared to Moverick, hackberry only looked similar in appearance, but it was a very different medicinal plant. Eugenia said that if the man's boss had been taking Moverick for a long time, then Hecken would weaken its properties, and the situation would only get worse. But that the herbalist reacted negatively. The man started yelling because Eugenia literally accused him of fraud. He also added that he has been growing herbs for 20 years. Eugenia smiled and said that the seller couldn't properly distinguish between herbs with that kind of experience, or else he was just trying to sell Hecken for profit. In that case, it constituted a crime. Pounding his fist on the table, the vendor complained about such bad luck. Glancing at the cursing salesman, Eugenia suggested that the blonde-haired man follow her to the herb shop on the other side. The man agreed. Thanking Eugenia, the man said he had never run such errands. Eugenia advised him to go to the hospital and get directions to the necessary pharmacy. The girl added that pharmacies may be more expensive than shops, but they are much safer. The man once again thanked her for her advice. Eugenia said that she was happy to help him and was about to leave, but the man interrupted her with a question asking if she was from the duchy. Eugenia was embarrassed and asked how the man realized it. He answered that her accent was slightly different. A simple person could not understand it, but the man felt this unique rhythm of the inhabitants of the duchy. Realizing that the man standing in front of her was from the duchy, Eugenia involuntarily became nervous. She asked herself if he knew that she was a wanted woman. The man wanted to thank Eugenia and asked to know her name, but Eugenia politely declined, saying she had to go now. Grabbing the girl's hand, the man said he was very eager to thank her. Smiling, Eugenia first asked him to let her go and then to talk. The interlocutor apologized for grabbing the girl. Eugenia smiled sweetly in response. The man assumed that Eugenia thought it was a simple courtesy, but after all, she had really helped him a lot. The blonde-haired man added that anyone would be confused when a stranger they were meeting for the first time asked their name and grabbed them, saying they would reward them. The man admitted that he works for the Juracia family and holds the lowest position. He must vouch for his identity so Eugenia could trust him. Not believing her ears, Eugenia asked again if the stranger really worked for the Duke. But the man replied that he was eager to repay her for her kindness, without which he would be dishonored in the family. In her thoughts, Eugenia was assured that her interlocutor really did not know that she was wanted. If he had known, he would not have been so obsessive in trying to pay her. Eugenia admitted that she was having trouble finding a job, so she asked the man to ask about a job in the Duke family. Smiling, the man said he would be sure to find out. Glowing with happiness, the girl asked how long it would take. The man replied that it would only have to wait a couple of days. He suggested to see each other again at this place at noon. Seeing the girl jumping with happiness, the man said that he was very happy to help, but he still decided not to give up his earlier question and asked again what the name of his interlocutor was. The girl modestly replied that her name was Eugenia and told the man to address her freely. The man in turn replied that his name was Shion, kindly kissing the girl's hand. It took longer than expected to reach the Empire. Elveri offered to rest Enric after the report, but the man ignored it. Looking at the bouquet of flowers, Enric said they reminded him of someone. Looking at Enric distracted, Elveri asked if he had heard him, but the man replied that he was very tired. Elveri said that they had been working very hard lately. It was probably much better when they were together with Eugenia. Without a word in response to Elveri's words, Enric said that he had to meet the Emperor and ordered Elveri to wait for him outside the doors. Entering the throne room, Enric introduced himself and took a knee, to which the Emperor rejoiced at his visit. The Emperor ordered Enric to get off his knees, for a man who has gone through so much hardship does not have to do that. He added that the man had done a very good job, and he was very worried because the man had arrived later than planned. The emperor said that if Enric had made a mistake, he could not show up in front of his father and younger brother. Enric apologized once again for making him worry. Putting his hand on his heart, Enric said that he had returned after completing the task given by the emperor. He added that he had hidden it in a safe place and was successfully protecting it. To his words, Enric added that he failed to complete the task that the emperor gave him additionally. The man said that he couldn't find the seal of the past duke. The emperor asked what had happened. The people who had agreed to help Enric had died. Because of this, the location of the seal remained unknown, but by checking the dynamics of the capital city of Hallant, Enric found out that no one seemed to have found the seal. The emperor said that apparently the seal was hidden in a place where it would be hard for an assistant to find it. The emperor asked if Enric had anything else to report besides that. After thinking about it for a bit, Enric realized that talking about Eugenia's gun would be best left alone. Finished with his thoughts, Enric was silent for a moment, then told the emperor that he wanted to resign. Rubbing his forehead, the emperor didn't want to listen to this conversation again. After all, it had been 3 years since he had last asked for it. Racked with doubt, the emperor admitted that it was hard for him to let go of the best warrior from the Shatten squad. But after thinking about it, he acknowledged that it was time to send Enric on leave, and offered to revisit this conversation after he was restored. Bowing his head, Enric said it was time for him to go. The emperor escorted him out in a friendly manner. Sitting at the communal table, Xion told Eugenia that he could get her a job. He also added that there was bad news, as the position was very low. Eugenia was to work in the laundry room, but without trying to hide the smile from her face, Eugenia said that she would be happy with any option, and she was very grateful that the man had honored her request. Eugenia asked when she could have an interview. Xion said that there was an option to do it right now. He suggested that she finish her tea and go meet with the head maid. Lightning finished her tea. Eugenia put the mug on the table with a clatter and rushed down the street towards the castle. Running down the alley, Eugenia tripped over a passerby and fell on Xion, but he caught her in time. Eugenia immediately became embarrassed and thanked the man for his help in a trembling voice. Smiling, Xion asked if she was hurt. Running on, Eugenia shouted that she was fine. Upon reaching the Duke's castle, Eugenia was surprised by its size. But interrupting her, Xion suggested she finally follow him inside. Eugenia realized that for the sake of getting the children into the house, she must succeed. After walking into the room, Xion said that the servants and the head butler lived there. Also, the building was often used as the office of the head maid. Standing in front of the door, Xion said that the head maid was in the room. Eugenia was ready to meet her. Knocking on the door, the man introduced himself by his name. Opening the door, the woman said she was waiting for them. Eugenia thought she should have opened the door first. She couldn't make such a mistake in her position. Greeting the woman, Eugenia introduced herself and said she was eager to work in the laundry room. Before continuing the conversation, the head maid offered to go inside and ordered Xion to go to the head butler, as he had been looking for him for a long time. After closing the door, the senior maid asked Eugene to take a seat on a chair. The woman asked if Eugenia had ever had to work as a maid before. She answered in the affirmative, adding that she had worked in an aristocratic family before. Having heard the answer, the older maid asked if the girl had a letter of recommendation.